Hey guys, AV Network Guy here. Today we're going over the initial setup options for a Cisco SG250 50-port PoE smart switch through the web browser, also known as webgui. Let's get straight into the video. But first, if it's your first time here, click the subscribe button and don't forget to comment and like the video. By default, the Cisco SG switch series usually have a static IPv4 IP address of 192.168.1.254 if the switch doesn't detect a DHCP server on any of its ports during the boot up process. In this case, I set my static IPv4 IP address to 192.168.1.253 and my subnet mask is set to 255.255.255.0. Launch your web browser and type http://192.168.1.254 and you'll be taken to the login page. If you have any issues or need any help getting to the login page, let me know in the comment section. Moving on. The default username is Cisco and the password is also Cisco. Depending on the firmware version you have, it may prompt you to change the password to a more complex password. Sometimes you have the option to cancel and move on. In this instance, I'm logged in basic mode. There's also an advanced mode, but that's for another video. We're at the Getting Started page, which is where you can set up the basics about your switch and network, specifically if you correctly planned your network deployment. This page can also be used if you're more experienced in setting up these switches, as you have options to very specific and important options. Some of the key features I'd like to point out are the Change Management, Application and Services option, and the Change Device IP address under the Initial Setup section of the page, and the Change Device Password under the Quick Access section. These features are very important if you have more than one of these switch models in your network topology and the physical connections are already made. Like the video if you find the content valuable so far. There's an easier way for new beginners to set up the switch and it's coming up. The next menu option is the dashboard, which gives you a summary of resource utilization, the system health, and some of the latest logs by default. But you can customize the different reports on your dashboard by clicking on the Customize button, and you'll be able to access the available reports that you can add to your dashboard. You can also edit, refresh, and remove chart options and data on your dashboard. The next menu option is the Configuration Wizards, and this is where anyone new to this switch can launch wizards that will help them understand and configure features step by step. Once you're done with the initial switch setup, you can use the VLAN configuration wizard to segregate the different switch traffic and broadcast. For example, you may need to put your Dante and control traffic on different VLANs if you're working in Pro AV, and this wizard is very helpful in setting this up for the first time. The ACL configuration wizard is designated for access control list, which is something you will use for more advanced access control on your network. I would recommend you use this wizard as it will ask the correct questions you need to answer in order to create the access control list by IPv4, IP address, or MAC address. I wouldn't worry about this feature for now. Once you make a change on any of the switch's features, you'll notice a red X button at the top of the page reminding you to save your changes in the startup config file which the switch uses once it's rebooted. The next option is the search page. Although I never use this page and the search bar seems present on every page, so let's just move on. This is the last page I'll be covering in this video, and in this video we'll focus on the system summary page. This page provides us with a lot of the critical information, so let's go over it. And don't forget to like the video! The system description lets you know the switch model and the number and type of ports present. The system location allows you to list the switch's physical location, and you can update that information by clicking on the edit button and adding the new information. The system contact allows you to list the switch's administrator's name, and you can update that information by clicking on the edit button and adding the new information. The hostname field allows you to add or update the switch's hostname on the network, and you can update that information by clicking on the edit button and adding the new information. In this case, it's AV Network Guy. The system object ID has to do with the MIB and SNMP, which we won't get into. The system uptime lets you know for how long the switch was powered on. The current time is self-explanatory. However, most of the time is incorrect on switches. So make sure you update it, and better yet, set it up with an NTP server in order to maintain the correct time, which is critical for your switch's logs when investigating or troubleshooting issues. The base MAC address is the base MAC address of the switch. Check out my Networking in AV Part 2 video. The jumbo frames is disabled by default and is important for certain very specific video applications and packets. The software information is very important. As you can see, we have 2 active images and 2 non-active. In short, what that means is that you have a main and backup partition on the switch, which is a great redundancy feature. If you have a major failure on one partition, the switch can boot into the secondary or backup partition, which will allow you to troubleshoot and fix the issue on the other partition. So make sure when you perform a firmware upgrade that you upgrade both partitions and all associated features for these partitions. In my Extreme Network Switch video, I showed a step-by-step on how to upgrade both the primary or main partition as well as the secondary or backup partitions. The TCP UDP services are listed in this portion of the page, but you can edit and update the options by clicking the edit button by the section title. HTTP service is your regular port 80 web browser connection, which doesn't include security. HTTPS service is port 443, which is a secured version of HTTP. You usually get prompts for security risk when you connect to an HTTPS page without a valid certificate. SNMP service is disabled by default and is responsible for monitoring. Telnet service is disabled by default and is an unsecured way to connect to the switch using an emulator. SSH service is disabled by default and is a secured way to connect to the switch using an emulator. I recommend you use SSH for remote connection using emulators. The next section is the PoE power information. PoE stands for Power over Ethernet, which is a feature that this switch has. With PoE, we can power network devices using the switch ports instead of local power to those devices. You can click on the detail button to customize the detail info displayed. Maximum available PoE power is based on the wattage of the current power supply. In this case, 375 watts are available for PoE. The total PoE power consumption will display the PoE consumption, and in this case it's 0 because no PoE devices are connected to the switch. The PoE power mode shows the mode of PoE you have set up. By default on the Cisco SG250, it is set to class limit. The next set of information is the switch's serial number and PID/VID. There's also a virtual representation of the switch showing the active ports and the power light lit. So, in the next video, we'll cover the other menu options under status and statistics. If you have any questions about the options I went over, please leave them in the comment section and I'll see you next time. Like, comment, subscribe.